The Revenant and Tomb by Herman P. Hunter. Overview. 4 adventurers, the main human character, the warrior with the magical sword, the elfish archer, and the short, muscular dwarfish fighter journey to a fabled mountain of Mount Horn of Torgiv to defeat some old evil. Review. There are 2 types of fantasy stories. With fantasy, novels tend to fall into one of 2 camps, world building or quest. Fantasy trends since about Robert Jordan have been an attempt to get beyond the 1,000-page mark and build a world where it seems like every family line and every forest has its history and story. The quest adventurers seem to try and establish cool characters quickly and get in the action. World building tends to lose focus on the quest, and quest stories tend to forget that the reader might not know the world that the story exists in. The One Who Returned. Where Hunter succeeds well in this quest storytelling is hinting at a world that is bigger than the story and makes characters interesting enough to want the reader to imagine more if another book isn't available. With just 4 characters to focus on, the world building can be narrowed down to just their stories. And really, there's only one character that is brought into the most focus. On the other hand, the quest story, which is to a cave and back again, flows the story well and in a reasonable time and story. The story's action and drama builds, rises, climaxes, and falls in a well-paced way. At 140 pages, this can be a difficult thing to do. The 3 main adventurers are different than the race of man, elf, and dwarf giant, but they are not so different for you need to know everything about their makeout. The curmudgeon guide drum is a good foil for the audience, learning new information about the world and the bigger story at large. The Tomb and the Forest. The prose of the story is well written. It's not too heavy in the ye old story. There are some really great lines and metaphors. One of my favorites was, no spoilers, in the midst of battle, one of the characters praying for the wind to come to have one moment of coolness. At that part of the story, that line was palpable. There were a few misses, like the quickness of the light catching fire, like fire to gasoline. This world could have gasoline, but it was a line that took me out of the story for a moment. The main character has an interesting story told within this story. Well, not specifically a Christian fantasy outright. The main character has a very interesting backstory of being resurrected from the dead and attributing the deeds, salvation, and creation to a one true God. The world Hunter writes of has all the elements where the author believes the world to exist, and which adds element of the authorial magic. One of my biggest gripes with George R.R. Martin in the world he writes in a clear indication that the gods, or etc. exists, and that smart characters do not believe this, and neither does the author. The book does not suffer from this deficiency. The action, quests, and characters move along, and the read is quite quick because of the action. The biggest complaint is the ending. I'm okay with the story not being part of a 12-part series, and this is the only book. The background given makes it more than enough in ideas of the world created. The very quick glance over one of the characters' change and end result is very glossed over for the sake of limits on a page, even if the ending is good. Christian art and fantasy. If you're looking for a quick story with a good quest, good combat, and 3-part story arc that believes in the world it creates, this one does what a good book does. It leaves you wanting another story, and a little bit more reveal of the world. I also listened to the audiobook, and the narrator Steve Fortune does a phenomenal job, and more narration from him should be sought after. There is only one God, and he saves the Revenant to go to the tomb. Final grade, B.